The chill in the air wasn't just the autumn wind biting at my skin. It was the same cold that settled deep in my bones as I stepped onto the polished marble floors of Sterling Trust Bank. Every click of my worn heels echoed in the cavernous lobby, a stark contrast to the hushed whispers of the well-dressed patrons. They glanced at me, then quickly away, their eyes judging my simple patched dress and the lines etched around my eyes. They saw an old black woman, weathered by years of sun and struggle. They didn't see the spirit that refused to break. My farm, Oak Haven, was more than just land. It was my mother's 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 legacy. Generations had tilled that soil, coaxed life from it, built dreams upon it. Now, it hung by a thread, tangled in a web of debt I barely understood. The farm had seen lean years, yes, but it had always provided. Until now, today was the day. The final meeting, the day I was supposed to beg, to plead, to offer up what little dignity I had left. I wasn't just carrying my own burdens. I carried the silent prayers of my ancestors, the hopes of my children, the very breath of Oakhaven. Each step felt heavy, each breath a struggle against the tightening knot in my chest. A young woman, no older than my granddaughter, greeted me with a polite but distant smile. She led me not to a private office, but to a glass-walled conference room, visible from the main lobby. My heart sank. This wasn't going to be a discreet discussion. This was going to be a spectacle. Inside, two men sat at a gleaming mahogany table. Mr. Caldwell, the senior loan officer, a man whose smile never quite reached his cold eyes, and beside him, a younger, eager assistant. Both wore suits that probably cost more than my entire year's harvest. They didn't stand. They just watched me approach, their expressions carefully neutral, but I felt the contempt radiating from them. "Mrs. Illara Vance," Mr. Caldwell began, his voice smooth, almost condescending. He lingered on my name, as if testing its unfamiliarity. "Thank you for joining us." I nodded, my voice catching in my throat. I couldn't trust myself to speak just yet. My gaze drifted beyond the glass walls. People were starting to notice. Loan officers at their desks pretended to work, but their ears were surely straining. A young couple waiting for a teller looked our way, their conversation fading. Mr. Caldwell tapped a pen against a thick file. "We've reviewed your latest proposal for Oakhaven Farm." He paused, letting the words hang. "Frankly, Mrs. Vance, it's insufficient. The numbers simply don't add up." The assistant snickered, a small, almost imperceptible sound, but it struck me like a stone. "Your farm," Mr. Caldwell continued, leaning back, "has been a drain for too long. We understand its sentimental value. But this is a bank, Mrs. Vance, not a charity." His eyes flicked to the lobby, then back to me, a silent message passing between him and his audience. Hands clenched under the table. Sentimental value. They spoke of Oakhaven as if it were a faded photograph, not a living, breathing entity that fed families and nurtured generations. "We gave you an extension," the assistant chimed in, his voice sharper. "A generous one, considering the circumstances. Your type of farming, Mrs. Vance, it's just not viable anymore. Not for someone in your position." My type of farming. My position. The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. They weren't just talking about crops and yields. They were talking about race, about class, about what they believed I, an old black woman from a rural community, was capable of. "The truth is," Mr. Caldwell picked up, "this debt has become a liability to the bank, a significant one. And quite frankly, your management style has shown a consistent pattern of underperformance." He pushed a tablet across the table, displaying charts and figures that screamed red. $250,000, Mrs. Vance? Do you truly believe you can ever repay that? He projected the figure onto a large screen behind him, visible even to those in the lobby. $250,000. It glowed, a scarlet letter branded across my family's name for everyone to see. The whispers in the lobby grew louder. I felt a flush creep up my neck, a burning humiliation. My cheeks felt hot, my eyes stung. I remembered my grandmother's stories of being denied loans, of being laughed out of offices, simply for wanting to own what was hers. It was happening again. The echoes of history, a fresh wound. Perhaps it's time to consider alternative options, Mr. Caldwell suggested, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Selling the land, downsizing, or, of course, the bank will have to reclaim its assets. He said, reclaim its assets, with an almost triumphant smirk. He was enjoying this, the power, the public display. He wanted me to break. He wanted me to cry. He wanted me to grovel. My mind raced, not with fear, but with a sudden, searing clarity. All the indignities, all the dismissals, all the subtle insults I had endured over the years, not just today, but a lifetime. They coalesced into a single, burning point. I looked at Mr. Caldwell, at his self-satisfied smirk. I looked at the glaring red number on the screen. I looked at the curious, pitying, and sometimes disdainful faces in the lobby. A strange calm washed over me. They saw a woman trapped, a woman defeated. But in that moment, as the last vestiges of shame burned away, replaced by something cold and hard, they had no idea what they had just awakened. My voice, when it finally came, was low, steady, and entirely devoid of the tremor I felt just moments before. "Is that all, Mr. Caldwell?" I asked, my gaze unwavering. He seemed momentarily taken aback by my composure. "Yes, Mrs. Vance. Unless you have a sudden, miraculous $250,000 hidden in your purse?" His tone dripped with mockery, and the assistant chuckled again. I didn't answer. I simply pushed myself up from the chair. My legs felt strong, rooted. I walked out of that glass room, through the echoing lobby, past the curious stairs. The cold air outside the bank felt different now. It didn't bite, it invigorated. They had shown me their hand. Now it was time to show them mine. They had laughed at my farm's debt. That day, they sealed their own fate. The words hung in the air. Her farm's debt. A charity case. Don't bother. Each phrase a stinging lash, delivered with a smile that barely hid their contempt. My ears still rang with their laughter, a brittle, mocking sound that echoed off the high ceilings of the bank lobby. My grandchildren, standing beside me, shifted uncomfortably. I felt their small hands instinctively reach for mine, their fear and embarrassment palpable. My son, David, clenched his jaw, his eyes fixed on the smug faces of Mr. Davies and his assistant, Mr. Henderson. I could feel his anger, a simmering volcano just beneath the surface. He wanted to erupt, to defend his mother, to defend our family's honor. But I squeezed his hand, a silent command for restraint. Not yet. Not like this. My own face, I knew, betrayed nothing. A lifetime of learning to mask pain, to hide rage, had taught me well. They expected tears. They expected pleading. They expected me to shrink, to break under the weight of their judgment and their supposed power. They mistook my composure for resignation. They always did. But inside, a cold, hard knot was forming. It wasn't the shame of the debt itself. We had faced debt before. Our farm, our land, it had seen tougher times than this. My grandparents had bought it with sweat and prayer after emancipation, turning barren earth into a vibrant legacy. My parents had fought off droughts, market crashes, and predatory lenders who saw opportunity in black resilience. We understood struggle. We understood the land's demands. What stung was the deliberate humiliation, the public spectacle, the way Mr. Davies had raised his voice, ensuring every customer, every teller, every passerby could hear our plight. He wanted to make an example of me, of us, a black family, a black woman, daring to stand on equal footing, daring to ask for a fair deal. In their eyes, we were still them, still second class, still meant to know our place. I met Mr. Davis' gaze. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, held a glint of triumph. He thought he had won. He thought he had put me back in my place. He thought he had broken me. He couldn't have been more wrong. This wasn't just about a loan anymore. It was about everything, every ancestor who toiled under a scorching sun, every generation that whispered dreams of true freedom, of ownership, of dignity. Every time we were told no when we deserved a yes, every door slammed in our faces, every smile that hid a dagger, a memory flashed through my mind. My grandmother, standing firm against a landlord who tried to cheat her out of her harvest, her back straight, her voice clear, even when her hands trembled slightly. She didn't have money. She didn't have power in their world, but she had an unbreakable spirit. She had a way of looking at a man that made him understand, without a single shouted word, that she was not to be trifled with. I saw her in the reflection of the polished marble floor. I felt her strength coursing through my veins. My farm, my family's legacy, was not a charity case. It was a testament, a living, breathing monument to our survival, our perseverance. It was the fertile ground from which our future would grow. And no sneering bank official, no dismissive laugh, no public shaming would ever diminish its value, or mine. I took a deep breath, the air in the bank suddenly feeling heavy, charged. My gaze swept over the ornate clock on the wall, the framed photographs of the bank's founders, all white men in stern suits, the polished brass, the quiet hum of money changing hands, money accumulating power. Power. That was what they wielded. That was what they understood. And that, I realized with a startling clarity that settled deep into my bones, was precisely what I would use. My hand still gripped my grandson's. He looked up at me, his brow furrowed with concern. I gave him a faint, reassuring smile. "It's all right, son," I murmured, my voice low, steady. "Sometimes you have to let folks show you who they are, and then you show them who you are." I turned my head slightly, catching Mr. Davies' eye one last time. There was no anger in my look now, only a quiet, resolute purpose that seemed to chill the very air around me. He didn't understand it. He simply saw a black woman, publicly shamed, perhaps trying to regain some semblance of pride. He saw pride. I saw a plan that was already taking root, blossoming in the fertile ground of decades of injustice, watered by the tears and sweat of generations. This debt, this moment, this humiliation, it was not an end. It was the beginning. I released my grandson's hand, placing a gentle palm on David's arm. "We're leaving," I stated, my voice carrying just enough to reach Mr. Davies' desk. Not a question, a declaration. "But I'll be back. You can count on it." Mr. Davies scoffed softly, a dismissive wave of his hand. "Of course, Mrs. Johnson, when you have the funds, you're always welcome to discuss your, options." His tone dripped with condescension. I simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. My eyes, however, held a different message, a promise. And that promise was about to become their worst nightmare. The words still echoed in the stale air, a cold laughter that seemed to stick to my skin. I walked away from the podium, from their smug faces, from the pitying glances of some, the knowing sneers of others. My back was straight, my head held high, but inside, a fire began to churn. Not a wild, uncontrolled blaze, but a deep smoldering heat. A heat I hadn't felt in decades. The bank lobby felt like a tomb. Each step I took on the polished marble floor resonated with the tremor in my chest. The doorman, a young black man, met my eyes with an unspoken apology. I gave him a small, dignified nod. He understood. He had seen this story before. Too many times. The sun outside was blinding. It hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, trying to clear the haze from my vision. The city noise, usually a dull hum, now felt like 1,000 tiny needles piercing my ears. I just needed to be home, needed to be on my land. The drive was a blur. The familiar roads, the trees, the fields passing by. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Each mile put more distance between me and their contempt. But it couldn't erase the feeling, the shame, the deep, burning indignation. It wasn't just about the debt. It was about what they represented, the history of it all, the way they looked at me, as if I were nothing, as if my life's work meant less than their fleeting amusement. I remembered my grandmother, Mama Rose. She always said, "Clara, they'll try to break you with words, but words can also build. You choose which ones you carry." Her voice, a quiet melody from the past, echoed in my mind. I thought of Papa John, my late husband. He built this farm with his own two hands. We built it together, from sun up to sundown, year after year. Every seed, every harvest, every brick, sweat and tears poured into this soil. This wasn't just land. It was our legacy, our heart. How many times had we faced adversity? The droughts that threatened to swallow us whole, the floods that tried to wash away everything, the market crashes that left us scrambling. We always found a way. We always came back stronger. And the banks, always the banks. They held the keys. They held the power. Or so they thought. They saw our brown skin, our calloused hands, our humble farmhouse, and they made assumptions. They always did. They saw debt. They saw struggle. They never saw the steel within us. I pulled into the long gravel driveway. The old oak tree stood sentinel, its branches wide and welcoming. The scent of honeysuckle filled the air. My sanctuary, my haven. I walked through the screen door, the familiar creak a comforting sound. The house was quiet. My grandchildren were at school. My daughter, busy with her own life. It was just me and the silence, a silence that held the weight of centuries. I sat at the kitchen table, the worn wood smooth beneath my fingertips. My eyes scanned the room. The faded curtains Mama Rose had sewn, the chipped ceramic plate my daughter made in kindergarten, the photos on the fridge, snapshots of joy and triumph, generations of life, resilience, love. And then a thought, clear and sharp, cut through the haze of my anger. It wasn't about paying them back. It was about what they represented, about teaching them a lesson they would never forget, a lesson about respect, about dignity, about true power. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had seen the end of Mama Clara, but they had only awakened something deep within me, something ancient, something they couldn't comprehend. I rose from the table, a quiet resolve settling over me. My steps were firm now, deliberate. I walked to the old heavy chest in the corner of my bedroom, the one Papa John had made for me. It held not just memories, but also secrets. Secrets I had kept for years. I knelt, turning the intricate lock. The scent of cedar and aged paper filled the air as I lifted the lid. Inside lay carefully organized documents, ledgers filled with numbers, certificates, Deeds, investments, a lifetime of quiet, shrewd decisions, of opportunities seized when no one was watching, of resources diligently, patiently accumulated. They saw an old black woman with a farm in debt. They saw someone to mock, someone to dismiss. They had no idea. I picked up the heavy, old fashioned phone on my bedside table. My fingers, still trembling slightly, dialed a number I hadn't used in years. It was time to call Mr. Davies, my financial advisor, the one who knew every secret, the one who had helped me build this quiet empire, brick by silent brick. Mr. Davies, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within me. I need you to prepare something for me, immediately. My gaze hardened, my eyes drifted to the window, to the vast expanse of my farm, shimmering under the afternoon sun. They thought they owned my future. They were wrong. Today, their game changed. Today, I would play mine. The dust motes danced in the late afternoon light, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing. Mama Rosie moved with a purpose that felt older than time itself, a rhythm honed by decades of tending to both earth and dreams. The farm, usually a haven of buzzing life, now held a different kind of tension. Each creak of the porch swing, each rustle of leaves in the pecan trees, felt like a silent countdown. The letter from First National Bank lay on the worn pine of her kitchen table, its stark red print a glaring declaration. It announced the imminent public auction of her land. 2 weeks, just 14 days, until everything she had built, everything her family had poured their sweat and dreams into, would be ripped away. Mr. Harrison and Mr. Thorne, with their condescending smiles and dismissive words, thought they had won. They thought she was a broken old woman, easily discarded. They were profoundly, irrevocably wrong. Mama Rosie drove her old faithful pickup truck into the city, the same city where she had faced such public humiliation, where she had felt the biting sting of their casual cruelty. This time, her destination was different. Not the towering, opulent bank building that represented their power, but a discreet, almost anonymous office block tucked away on a quieter, less conspicuous street. The name etched on the brass plaque beside the heavy oak door was simple, elegant. Chen and Associates. She stepped into a small, understated reception area, hushed and respectful. The air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, a stark contrast to the sterile, impersonal scent of the bank. A young woman with kind, intelligent eyes looked up from her desk. "Mama Rosie," she said softly, a genuine warmth in her voice. "Mr. Chen is expecting you." Mr. Chen, a man whose wisdom was as deep and unwavering as his silence. She had known him for decades, a relationship forged not in fleeting transactions, but in mutual respect and shared foresight. He was one of the few who had looked past her calloused hands and plain working clothes, who had seen the sharp, calculating mind beneath, the quiet strength of her spirit. Many years ago, when her late husband Thomas had spoken of a wild, almost outlandish idea, investing in a fledgling technology, an unknown company built by young dreamers with grand visions. It was Mr. Chen who had listened, truly listened. He sat behind a polished mahogany desk, framed by shelves of ancient-looking books that seemed to absorb all sound. His silver hair was neatly combed, his eyes sharp and knowing, yet always holding a profound calm. "Rosie," he said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "It's been too long, my friend." "Life keeps you busy, Mr. Chen," she replied, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil that had led her here. She settled into the worn leather chair opposite him, its familiar comfort a small reassurance. No pleasantries were needed here. They understood each other on a level that transcended mere words. I heard about the bank, he said, a hint of concern finally surfacing in his eyes. That young man, Harrison, he's a shark, Rosie, a hungry one, and Thorn, his shadow, always eager to please. Mama Rosie nodded slowly, a ghost of a memory flitting across her face. They made a show of it, in front of everyone, like I was some kind of spectacle. The memory still held a faint sting, a lingering echo of that humiliation, but it no longer held power over her. It was fuel. They thought they had me cornered, Mr. Chen. They truly believed I had nowhere left to turn. Mr. Chen leaned back, his gaze unwavering, assessing. And do they? No, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, but with an iron will resonating through every syllable. Quite the opposite. I came here today, Mr. Chen, because I want to buy the bank. A beat of profound silence filled the room. Mr. Chen's expression remained largely unreadable, a lifetime of measured reactions at play, but a definite flicker in his eyes betrayed a momentary, exquisite surprise. It was quickly replaced by a slow, knowing smile that spread across his face, a genuine, almost joyous expression. I had a feeling you might say something like that, Rosie. Always thinking 10 steps ahead, aren't you? He reached for a file on his desk. Its cover was plain, unassuming, a simple manila folder. Inside, however, were numbers that could make even the most seasoned financier gasp, figures that told a story of patience, foresight, and extraordinary growth. The shares from Apex Innovations, he began, his voice a little softer now, laced with profound respect. You never sold a single one, did you? Not even when everyone advised you to diversify, to cash out. Mama Rosie shook her head slowly, a faint nostalgic smile gracing her lips. Thomas believed in it. He said it would change the world, Rosie. He said to hold it for our future, our children's future. For when they try to tell us we don't belong, that we're not smart enough, not strong enough. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, picturing Thomas, hunched over his makeshift workbench in their old barn, blueprints scattered around him, his eyes alight with the pure, unadulterated vision of an inventor. He had seen past the limitations of their small farm, past the systemic barriers placed before them. He had believed in a world where their ingenuity, their quiet brilliance, would one day be undeniably valued, and Mama Rosie, ever the practical visionary, had trusted him, placing her faith not just in a nascent company, but in a sacred promise. She had meticulously managed her farm's earnings, setting aside small, consistent amounts to buy more shares, quietly, patiently. No one had known the true depth of her holdings. It was her private safeguard, her quiet defiance against a world that expected her to remain small, to remain contained. Apex Innovations, Mr. Chen murmured, his voice full of awe, is now a global giant, a titan in its field. Those shares, Rosie, they've multiplied beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Your initial investment, modest as it was then, is now substantial, incredibly substantial. He paused, looking at her with an admiration that shone clearly in his eyes. More than enough to buy out First National Bank several times over, with a significant surplus. A small, almost imperceptible sigh escaped Mama Rosie. Not of relief, but of deep confirmation. The silent sacrifices, the years of holding firm against doubt and temptation, the quiet strength she had cultivated through a lifetime of resilience, it had all led, unerringly, to this pivotal moment. The process will be complex, of course, Mr. Chen continued, his professional demeanor returning, but by no means impossible. It will require absolute discretion and speed. We'll need to move quickly and decisively before Mr. Harrison finalizes the auction of your farm. He'll want to get rid of you first to ensure no surprises. Mama Rosie's gaze sharpened, her eyes holding a glint of steel. Let him try. I want him to sign the papers himself. I want him to know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, exactly who he was dealing with, who he dismissed. Her voice was calm, steady, but the words carried the accumulated weight of generations of injustice, of slights and struggles. Mr. Chen nodded slowly as he, knowing glint in his own eyes. Consider it done, Rosie. We'll need to set up a robust holding company, a shell entity that obscures your involvement until the last possible moment. We'll approach the bank's board of directors directly, bypassing their frontline staff entirely. This will be, in essence, a hostile takeover. You want to buy them out from under them before they even realize what's happening. Exactly, she confirmed, a quiet satisfaction settling over her. And I want to keep my farm undisturbed. No more debt, no more threats. Of course, Mr. Chen assured her, picking up his pen. That goes without saying. Your farm will be free and clear. We'll ensure its protection within the new structure. He began to make notes, his pen scratching quietly on the thick cream-colored paper. This will be a delicate dance, Rosie, a carefully orchestrated symphony of finance, law, and impeccable timing. But we have all the right notes, and a conductor who knows exactly what she wants. As Mama Rosie rose from the chair, a sense of quiet triumph settling in her bones, she felt a lightness she hadn't known in decades. Thank you, Mr. Chen, for everything. It's an honor, Rosie, he replied, standing to meet her gaze, his expression solemn and respectful. Truly, to witness such a long game played with such grace, such foresight, and now to help you bring it to its spectacular conclusion. She walked out of Chen and Associates and into the twilight. The city lights began to twinkle in the encroaching dusk, a myriad of stars against the darkening sky. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Mama Rosie's lips. She thought of Mr. Harrison, probably celebrating his impending victory over a small black farmer. He saw only debt, only weakness, only a woman whose time had passed. He had no idea of the quiet empire she had built, brick by patient brick, with nothing but faith, foresight, and a profound intuitive understanding of what truly holds value in this world. The game was changing, and she was holding all the cards, ready to play them, one by precise one. The auction date for her beloved farm still loomed, a sword hanging over her family. But Mama Rosie knew something Harrison didn't. That sword was about to be turned on its wielder. She just needed to ensure the timing was absolutely perfect. An unassailable blow. The next few days would be a blur of phone calls, intricate paperwork, and hushed negotiations in the unseen corridors of financial power. A secret war being waged, not with shouts, but with precise, calculated moves. And the first, undeniable shot was about to be fired. The quiet hum of the old grandfather clock filled Elara's study. Each tick was a beat against time, a countdown. The bank's final notice had arrived 2 days ago, a sterile, official document, but Elara felt the mocking tone seep through its typed words. It was a thinly veiled threat, daring her to respond. They still thought she was a simple farmer, trapped by circumstance. They still underestimated her. She spread the documents across the polished mahogany table. Not her farm's papers. Not anymore. These were the bank's financial statements, years of public records, meticulously gathered by her team. Her team. That phrase still felt a little strange on her tongue, but it was real. Her nephew, Marcus, a brilliant legal mind she'd quietly supported through law school, sat opposite her. Beside him, Anya, a sharp financial analyst Marcus had vouched for, tapped quietly on her tablet. "The numbers are clear, Auntie Elara," Marcus began, his voice low, respectful. Their liquidity is tighter than they let on. Several bad loans in their portfolio, disguised by creative accounting. And that real estate venture, it's a house of cards. Ilara nodded, her gaze fixed on a particular balance sheet. Mr. Harrison's bonuses, she murmured. They've been hefty. And Mr. Thorne's too. Funny how a bank struggling to keep its books straight still finds plenty for its executives. Anya looked up, a faint smile playing on her lips. They're living high on the hog, betting on the continued ignorance of their clients. They assumed no one would dig this deep. Certainly not a struggling farmer like you, Mrs. Vance. The sarcasm in Anya's voice was a soft, satisfying hum. Ilara felt a flicker of the old anger, quickly replaced by cool determination. They assumed wrong. They always assume wrong about us. She remembered the way Mr. Harrison's eyes had swept over her, dismissing her worn but clean clothes, her hands calloused from decades of honest work. He saw only a statistic, a problem to be managed, not a person to be respected. He saw a black woman, an easy target. So, the plan stands? Marcus asked, leaning forward. His brow was furrowed with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The full acquisition, not just paying off the debt, but buying the entire institution. Ilara met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. The plan stands, Marcus. This isn't just about my farm anymore. It's about every farmer they've pushed to the brink, every family they've exploited, every dream they've tried to bury. She closed her eyes for a moment, picturing the sprawling Vance land. Generations had toiled there, their sweat and hope watered into its rich soil. Her great-grandparents had bought it parcel by parcel, post-emancipation, a testament to freedom and self-sufficiency. They faced threats, violence, and constant attempts to dispossess them. But they held on. They always held on. She would not be the generation to let it slip away. We've identified the key shareholders, Anya interjected, bringing Ilara back to the present. A mix of institutional investors and a few long-term private holders. We've approached the institutions discreetly through a shell corporation. They're open to an offer, especially given the bank's underlying instability. Ilara opened her eyes. Good. And the private holders? More challenging, Anya admitted. Some are deeply loyal to the bank's legacy. Others are simply holding out for a higher premium. But there's one, a family trust. The matriarch is in her 90s, not well. Her children are eager to liquidate assets. They hold a significant chunk, enough, with the institutional shares, to give us a controlling interest. A sliver of a smile touched Ilara's lips. Timing, Anya. Sometimes, timing is everything. She thought of her own mother, strong and resolute, teaching her how to read ledgers as a child, how to understand the rhythm of money, how to save not just for a rainy day, but for a whole storm. Never put all your eggs in one basket, Ilara, her mother used to say, and always have a bigger basket hidden away. Ilara had listened. She had worked, not just on the farm, but in quiet, calculated ventures, investments nobody knew about, land bought under different names, diversified portfolios. A legacy built brick by brick, not for show, but for security, for protection, for moments like this. We need to move quickly on that family trust, Ilara instructed, her voice calm, deliberate. Before word leaks out, before the current board gets wind of our intentions. Our offers are structured to be very appealing, Marcus assured her. Confidentiality agreements are in place. They won't know it's you, Auntie Ilara, not until it's too late for them to stop it. The thought of Mr. Harrison and Mr. Thorne's faces when they discovered the truth brought a strange satisfaction, not a cruel joy, but a deep sense of poetic justice. They had seen her as powerless. They were about to learn the true meaning of power. What about the legal implications? Ilara asked, always thorough. Any way they can try to block us? We've covered every angle, Marcus replied, confidence radiating from him. The regulatory filings are complex but sound. We're operating within all legal frameworks. They won't have a leg to stand on. He paused, then added, You've been planning this for a long time, haven't you, Auntie Elara? Not just this specific bank, but preparing for something big. Elara looked out the window at the familiar silhouette of her old barn, dark against the twilight sky. Life teaches you lessons, Marcus. Some come gentle, some come hard. My people, our people, have learned the hardest lessons of all. You learn to build your own shield. You learn to make sure your children and grandchildren never have to face the same battles unprepared. She picked up a small, intricately carved wooden bird from her desk, running her thumb over its smooth surface. It was a gift from her late husband, a symbol of freedom and resilience. They tried to break us, Marcus, for generations. They tried to tell us we didn't belong, that we weren't smart enough, rich enough, worthy enough. But we never stopped working, never stopped dreaming, never stopped building. And sometimes, the quiet ones, the ones they overlook, they have the deepest wells. The offer to the family trust goes out tonight, Anya confirmed, closing her laptop. It's robust. They'd be foolish not to take it. Make sure it's impeccable, Alara said, her gaze returning to the bank's financial report, specifically the page detailing their executive compensation. Leave no room for doubt, no room for negotiation. This isn't a plea, it's an opportunity for them to get out, for us to step in. She felt a tremor of anticipation, a feeling she hadn't experienced since she was a young woman, taking her first daring steps into business. The risk was enormous, the stakes higher than anything she had ever faced. But the alternative, succumbing to their arrogance, losing her family's legacy, was unthinkable. Tomorrow, Marcus, Anya, Ilara announced, rising from her chair. Her voice was firm, resolute. Tomorrow, we make them an offer they cannot refuse. An offer not just for shares, but for a new direction, a new kind of bank, one built on respect, on dignity, on justice. She walked to the window, looking towards the distant lights of the town, where the bank building stood, imposing and seemingly invincible. Soon it would be different. Soon its foundations would be shaken, not with violence, not with anger, but with quiet, undeniable power. The kind of power that comes from a lifetime of being underestimated. The kind that comes from the deep, hidden wells of a people who have learned to endure, to build, and to wait for their moment. Her farm was her legacy, yes, but her resolve, her unyielding spirit, that was her true inheritance. And she was about to spend it all, not just to save her farm, but to claim what was rightfully hers, respect, and to rewrite a painful narrative, one share at a time. The next steps would be crucial, irrevocable. The battle was about to begin in earnest. The eviction notice arrived a week later. Not a surprise, not anymore. It was typed on crisp white paper. The bank's logo, stark and imposing, sat at the top. Another signature, another name I barely remembered, threatening to take what was ours. They thought they were cornering me. They thought they had me trapped. But every notice, every condescending phone call only deepened my resolve. My resolve hardened like the old oak tree outside my window, unyielding through every storm. This wasn't just about the farm anymore. It was about respect. It was about dignity. It was about every black family they had dismissed, every dream they had crushed beneath their polished shoes. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, the morning sun streaming through the window, painting the worn wood with gold. The notice lay beside my coffee cup. It looked like an end, but it felt like a beginning. The air felt charged, pregnant with unspoken power. My children, bless their hearts, saw the paper, and their eyes clouded with worry. My daughter's hand instinctively reached for mine. "Mama, what is it?" she asked, her voice trembling, a mirror of the fear I had fought to hide from them for so long. "It's nothing we haven't faced before, child," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the storm brewing inside me. "Just another step in a very long journey." They knew I was fighting. They didn't know how big that fight truly was, the sheer scale of it. I couldn't tell them yet. Not until all the pieces were perfectly in place. Not until the hammer finally fell on the other side. Their father's spirit was with me. My ancestors' resilience flowed through my veins, a river of strength, connecting me to every single one who came before. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, called me that afternoon. His voice was calm, reassuring, a steady anchor in the coming tempest. "The offer is ready, Mrs. Johnson. The final details are confirmed. Every I dotted, every T crossed." I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing the faces of those men at the bank. Mr. Thompson's sneer, Mr. Harrison's impatient sigh, their smirks, their dismissive waves of the hand, their utter belief in their own unquestionable power. "Good," I said, the single word carrying the weight of years of quiet suffering and strategic planning. "It's time to deliver it, right into their hands." He paused, a slight hesitation in his voice. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Johnson? It's a bold move, unprecedented even." "I've never been surer about anything in my life, Mr. Davies. This isn't just a move, it's an inevitability." He understood. He had seen the fire in my eyes from the very first meeting. He had witnessed the quiet determination that had grown into an inferno. The next day, a nondescript heavy package arrived at the bank, addressed directly to Mr. Thompson, the branch manager. It wasn't a pleading letter, thin and filled with desperate pleas for mercy. It wasn't a desperate request for more time, another deferment. It was thick, dense with legal documents and meticulously prepared financial statements, pages upon pages, each one a testament to meticulous preparation. A hush, I imagined, fell over the reception area when the courier, uniformed and impersonal, handed it over. A momentary pause in the bank's usual bustling arrogance. Mr. Thompson, ever the picture of self-importance, his suit perfectly pressed, took the package with a practiced air of dismissiveness. He glanced at the sender's name, my name. A flicker of annoyance, like a fly buzzing too close, crossed his carefully composed face. He probably thought it was some last-ditch effort, a final, desperate appeal from a woman who didn't know when to quit. He tossed it onto his assistant's desk with a dismissive grunt. "Another one," I imagined him saying, his voice laced with patronizing weariness. "What does she want now? Can't she just accept her fate?" He had no idea, absolutely none. The true contents of that package were beyond his narrow comprehension. I received a call from Mr. Davies a few hours later, a subtle note of excitement now in his voice. "They're reviewing it, Mrs. Johnson, or at least they've started. The initial shock seems to have worn off, replaced by intense scrutiny." "Good. Let them review. Let them read every single word." I knew it would take time for the magnitude of the package to sink in, for the numbers to align, for the legalities to be undeniable. It wasn't just an offer to save my farm. It was a declaration, a complete, undeniable reversal of power dynamics. The bank's lawyers would be called in a frenzy. Their executives, usually so complacent, would be scrambling, their comfortable world tilting. The arrogance that had defined their dealings with me, their casual dismissal of my very existence, would slowly, painfully begin to crack. And then it would shatter. I felt no triumph in their impending panic, No vengeful glee, only a quiet, deep sense of satisfaction, a righting of wrongs. This wasn't revenge, not in the petty sense. This was simply balance. Reclaiming what was taken, what was denied, reasserting what they had so casually disregarded. My worth, my family's legacy, my people's enduring strength. I remember standing in the old barn that evening, the smell of hay and dust a familiar comfort, a balm to my spirit. The same barn where my grandmother used to tell me stories, under the soft flickering glow of a single lantern. Stories of resilience, stories of what it meant to hold on to your land, your legacy, even when the world tried to snatch it away. She would always say, her voice soft but firm, they can take your crops, they can take your money, but they can never take your spirit, child. Never let them touch that. I closed my eyes, feeling her presence surrounding me, a warm embrace, feeling the weight of generations resting on my shoulders, not as a burden, but as a source of immense power. I wasn't just buying a bank, I was buying back a piece of my family's history, steeped in hard work and persistent hope. A piece of black history, twisted and denied, now being rewritten with bold, undeniable strokes. A narrative of strength, not servitude. Every dollar, every signature on those documents was a testament to survival, to unwavering strength, to a promise kept to those who came before. The call from Mr. Thompson came 2 days later, just as Mr. Davies had predicted. His voice was different this time, dramatically so, no longer condescending, no longer dismissive. There was a tremor in it now, a noticeable wobble, a hint of confusion, perhaps even fear, replacing the smug confidence I had grown so used to hearing. Mrs. Johnson, he began, his tone almost supplicating, we need to discuss your proposal. He stumbled over the word proposal, as if it were a foreign language in connection to me, in connection to a woman like me. I believe my lawyers have made everything very clear, Mr. Thompson, I said, voice steady and even, giving away nothing. Yes, but this is quite unprecedented. We've never seen anything quite like it. He sounded genuinely bewildered. Is it? I asked, my voice as calm as a summer lake, reflecting his confusion back at him. Or is it simply unexpected from someone like me? Someone you so easily underestimated? He was silent for a long, heavy moment. I could almost hear his mind racing, trying to reconcile the facts with his prejudiced assumptions. The comfortable narrative he'd built around me, the struggling black farmer on the verge of ruin, was shattering into a million pieces around him. We need to schedule a meeting, Mrs. Johnson. Immediately. A full board meeting is being convened. His desperation was palpable. There's no need for a meeting, Mr. Thompson, I said, cutting him off gently but firmly. The terms are non-negotiable. Everything you need is in that package. He seemed to choke on his words. Non-negotiable? But this is a financial institution. Such transactions always involve negotiation. And I am a financial entity, Mr. Thompson, a very serious one that is now making you an offer you can't refuse. My words were precise, unyielding. The line went quiet again. The full realization was hitting him now, slowly, painfully, like a dawning terrible sun. The full weight of the package, the undeniable implications of what I was doing, what I had already done. He thought I was trying to save my farm. He never imagined I was coming for his bank, coming to own it outright. We require a full board meeting, he finally managed to say, his voice strained, almost pleading. This requires significant deliberation, a full legal review. Take all the time you need, Mr. Thompson, I said, a faint private smile touching my lips. But know this, the clock is ticking, and my offer has an expiration date. I hung up the phone, feeling the quiet hum of power thrumming through me. A power earned, not given. The game had changed, irrevocably, and they were finally starting to see it, to feel the tremor beneath their feet. The stage was set. The final act was about to begin. The matriarch was ready. Was the bank? They were about to find out. My heart felt a cold dread, not for myself, but for the history repeating, for the way my children's faces fell, for the shame they were forced to witness. But that feeling lasted only a moment, a flicker. Then something else ignited, a fire deep within my soul, one that had been banked for years but never extinguished. Mr. Davies leaned back, a smug look on his face. "So, Mrs. Johnson," he said, drawing out my name, savoring the moment, "it seems your options are limited. The bank simply cannot justify extending further credit." Mr. Thorne nodded in agreement, a pitying, condescending smile plastered on his lips. "Perhaps a smaller property, Mrs. Johnson? Something more manageable?" They spoke as if I wasn't there, as if I was a child, or worse, a ghost from a past they'd long dismissed. My family stirred, ready to defend me, ready to erupt. But I raised a hand, a quiet signal. "Wait." I looked from Mr. Davies to Mr. Thorne. My gaze was steady, unwavering. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the room's tense silence. "You misunderstand." They chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "Misunderstand what, Mrs. Johnson?" Mr. Davies scoffed. "The ledger is quite clear." "The ledger reflects the past," I corrected him. My voice grew a little stronger. "And it reflects your limited perspective." I pulled out my phone, not to call a lawyer, not to beg for help, but to execute the final step of a plan set in motion weeks ago. My thumb glided across the screen, a single, decisive tap. My eldest son, Michael, leaned closer. "Mama," he whispered, concern etched on his face. My daughter, Sarah, reached for my hand. I squeezed her hand. "It's time," I told them, my eyes still fixed on the bank officials. Suddenly, a side door opened. A sharp, urgent knock. A figure stepped into the room. A man in an impeccably tailored suit, carrying a sleek leather brief. He walked with purpose, his eyes scanning the room until they met mine. He gave a slight, respectful nod. Mr. Davies frowned. "Who is this?" he demanded, irritation lacing his tone. "We're in a private meeting." The man ignored him. He walked directly to my side. He opened his brief, extracting a sheaf of documents. He placed them gently on the table in front of me. He spoke not to the bankers but to me. "Mama Rose, the paperwork is finalized. Per your instructions." My instructions. The words hung in the air. The bankers exchanged confused glances. "Paperwork for what?" Mr. Thorne interjected, his voice tinged with suspicion. "We haven't approved any new applications." I picked up the top document. The logo on the letterhead was stark, unmistakable. The bank's own logo, but underneath it, smaller print. "Terms of acquisition." I held it up for them to see. Their eyes widened, first in disbelief, then in dawning horror. Mr. Davies leaned forward, squinting. His face went pale. Mr. Thorne gasped a choked sound. This can't be right," Mr. Davies stammered. He snatched the document from my hand, his fingers trembling. He scanned the page, his eyes darting back and forth. "This is impossible." The man in the suit spoke again. His voice was calm, professional. "On the contrary, gentlemen, Mrs. Johnson finalized the acquisition of a controlling stake in your financial institution this morning. The wire transfers were completed just minutes ago." The room fell silent. A silence so profound you could hear the blood rushing in their ears. My children stared. their mouths agape. My grandchildren, still too young to fully grasp the words, sensed the immense shift in power. I watched Mr. Davies and Mr. Thorne. Their faces, once so full of disdain, were now a mask of utter shock. Their smug arrogance had vanished, replaced by a raw, terrifying comprehension. "You see," I said, my voice firm now, steady, filling the room. "When you spoke of my limited options, you were projecting your own." My gaze swept over them. "You thought I came here today to beg, to plead for an extension, for mercy." A small bitter smile touched my lips. "You thought I was weak, that my farm, my family's legacy was vulnerable to your whims." The man in the suit cleared his throat. "Effective immediately, gentlemen, your positions as senior loan officers are under review, as is the rest of the current management structure." Mr. Davies dropped the document. It fluttered to the table. His eyes were wide, fixed on me. "Mrs. Johnson, what have you done?" he whispered. "I have protected what is mine," I replied, my voice unwavering. "And in doing so, I have acquired what you believed was yours." The poetic justice of it was almost unbearable. They had publicly shamed me over debt. They had laughed at my perceived powerlessness. And in that very moment, I had become their boss, their owner. "The specifics of the transition will be handled by my legal team," the man in the suit continued, gesturing to another folder of documents. "There will be an all-staff meeting at 3 p.m. this afternoon. You are, of course, expected to attend, but perhaps not in the capacity you currently imagine." Mr. Thorne tried to speak, but no words came out. He looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air. "This bank," I stated, rising slowly from my chair, my family now standing with me, united and awestruck. "The institution that has for generations held the fate of families like mine in its hands. The institution that has often forgotten its duty to the very communities it claims to serve." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "That institution," I declared, looking directly into the stunned, desperate eyes of Mr. Davies and Mr. Thorne, "is now under new management. My management." The air thrummed with unspoken questions, with incredulity and dawning fear. They still couldn't fully process it. How? Why? What would happen next? The real drama, the full weight of their consequences, was still to unfold. The air in the boardroom was thick with unspoken words. The final documents lay on the polished mahogany table, each page signed, each clause ratified. My signature, bold and deliberate, marked the end of one era and the dawn of another. The ink was barely dry. Mr. Sterling and Miss Davies sat stiffly across from me. Their faces were studies in forced composure. Their eyes, however, betrayed the tremor beneath. They watched me, then the documents, then the quiet legal team packing their briefcases. The silence stretched, a heavy blanket woven from their defeat and my quiet triumph. I looked at them, really looked at them, not with anger, not with hatred, but with a deep, calm understanding. I saw the fear in their eyes, the dawning realization of their own miscalculation, the sheer magnitude of their error. "So," I began, my voice clear, steady, filling the room without effort, "it is done." Sterling swallowed hard. Davies gripped her hands in her lap. "The ownership is transferred," I continued. "First National Bank is now under new management." I paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing them to sink into every corner of the room, into every fiber of their being. This wasn't just a business transaction. It was a reclaiming, a restoration. "I imagine you've been wondering about your positions," I said, a faint, almost imperceptible tilt to my head. Sterling cleared his throat. "Miss Lena, or rather, Madam Owner, we understand this is a new chapter. We are prepared to adapt." to serve your vision. His voice, once so condescending, now held a desperate, oily sheen. Davies nodded vigorously, a pale imitation of her usual dismissive authority. We are committed to the bank, to its future. We have considerable institutional knowledge. I allowed myself a small, knowing smile, a ghost of the one I'd worn that day in the lobby, when they'd paraded my debt like a shameful secret. Institutional knowledge, I echoed softly. Yes, you certainly do. Knowledge of how to dismiss, how to belittle, how to underestimate. Their faces flushed. The last vestiges of their composure began to crumble. My vision for this bank, I stated, leaning slightly forward, my gaze unwavering, is one of community, of respect, of opportunity, especially for those who have been overlooked, those who have been made to feel small, unworthy. I met Sterling's eyes directly. A vision where a farmer, struggling to keep her land, is met with understanding and solutions, not public ridicule. He flinched, as if physically struck. Mr. Sterling, I continued, your position as CEO is terminated, effective immediately. Miss Davies, your role as head of loans is also concluded. The words hung in the silence. They were absolute, unyielding. Sterling stammered, But, but, Madam Owner, we can explain. We were just following procedure. The market dictates. The market, I interrupted, my voice still soft, but with an edge that cut through his excuses, is not an excuse for a lack of humanity or integrity. This bank will no longer operate with such a limited understanding of what truly matters. You will both be escorted out of the building today, I finished. Your severance packages will be processed according to your contracts. But your influence here ends now. They rose slowly, their movements stiff, defeated. The power had shifted, irrevocably. The once mighty figures, who had held my family's fate in their condescending hands, were now just two employees, dismissed with a dignity they had never afforded others. Later that day, I stood in the grand lobby of the bank, the very place where they had tried to break me. The staff had gathered, a mixture of apprehension and curiosity on their faces. I addressed them not from a podium, but from the center of the room, looking each person in the eye. This institution, I announced, my voice carrying clearly, will be renamed. It will no longer be First National Bank. From this day forward, it will be called the Legacy Bank. A murmur went through the crowd. Because every person, every family, every farm has a legacy worth protecting, worth nurturing. This bank will be a steward of those legacies. It will be a place where hard work is honored, where dreams are given a chance to flourish, regardless of background or appearance. I spoke of new loan programs, specifically designed to support local farmers and small businesses, of financial literacy initiatives for underserved communities, of a culture built on empathy and genuine service. I saw tears in some of the employees' eyes, relief, hope, a recognition of something they had perhaps longed for. The atmosphere in the grand hall had transformed. From a temple of cold transactions, it was now imbued with a sense of purpose, a promise of warmth. When I finally returned to the farm, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the fields. My children and grandchildren were waiting for me on the porch, their faces alight with a pride that made my heart swell. They rushed to me, embracing me. "Mama Lena," my daughter whispered, "you did it. You really did it." I looked out over the land, my land, the same fields my ancestors had tilled. The soil felt richer today. The air smelled sweeter. The farm, once a symbol of struggle and potential loss, was now the very foundation of my strength, the root of my legacy. The bank, that symbol of oppression, was now mine. It was no longer just about the money. It was about the principle, about proving that dignity, resilience, and unwavering belief in one's own worth could move mountains. It was about turning a weapon of injustice into a tool for empowerment. The debt was paid, but more than that, a new future had been sown. A future where the mocking laughter of the privileged would be replaced by the quiet, powerful hum of genuine progress. A future where my farm, and every farm like it, would never again be looked down upon. My story, our story, had been rewritten, and this was just the beginning of what the legacy bank would build.